If you think Bitcoin is still the anti-government rebel currency that libertarians dreamed about in 2009, you're living in the past. Right now, while you're scrolling through social media and checking price charts, something massive is happening behind closed doors. Governments around the world are quietly accumulating Bitcoin, not to destroy it, but to own it. The same institutions that once called it a scam, a tool for criminals, and a threat to financial stability are now buying it by the billions. And the worst part? Most Bitcoin holders are celebrating this like it's a victory, not realizing they're watching their revolution get absorbed by the very system it was meant to replace. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Bitcoin has failed as a currency. Nobody is using it to buy coffee. Nobody is getting paid in Bitcoin for their regular job. Transaction fees spike so high during busy periods that it becomes unusable for normal people. The dream of peer-to-peer electronic cash that bypasses banks and governments died years ago, but nobody wants to admit it. What Bitcoin has become instead is digital gold, a store of value, an asset. And assets don't threaten governments. Assets get regulated, taxed, and eventually controlled. Bitcoin didn't disrupt the system. It joined the system. And now the system is swallowing it whole. Look at what's happening with Bitcoin ETFs. BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world with over $10 trillion under management, launched a Bitcoin ETF. Fidelity did the same. These aren't crypto companies. These are the giants of traditional finance, the same institutions that Bitcoin was supposedly designed to make obsolete. And they're not just offering Bitcoin exposure. They're becoming the custodians, the gatekeepers. When you buy a Bitcoin ETF, you don't own Bitcoin. You own a financial product that tracks Bitcoin's price. You can't move it, you can't spend it, you can't withdraw it to your own wallet. BlackRock holds the actual Bitcoin, and you hold a piece of paper that says you're entitled to its value. That's not decentralization. That's just the old system with a new asset class. Here's where it gets darker. Governments are watching this and learning. El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, and everyone in the crypto space cheered like it was some kind of validation. But look deeper. El Salvador's government controls how Bitcoin is implemented. They built the infrastructure. They decide the rules. They can track every transaction that goes through their official wallet. What looked like Bitcoin adoption was actually a government using Bitcoin as a tool for greater financial surveillance and control. And other nations are taking notes, figuring out how to harness Bitcoin for their own strategic interests, rather than letting it exist as an alternative to their authority. The United States government already owns more Bitcoin than most countries' entire reserves. How? Seizures. The FBI, DEA, and IRS have confiscated billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin from darknet markets, ransomware hackers, and criminal operations. They auction some of it off, sure, but they're also holding massive amounts. And now there's serious discussion in Congress about creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve, just like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Think about what that means. The U.S. government, which prints the world's reserve currency, is considering stockpiling Bitcoin as a national asset. That's not Bitcoin winning against the dollar. That's Bitcoin becoming another tool in the government's financial arsenal. China banned Bitcoin mining, and everyone assumed they were anti-crypto. But here's what actually happened. They pushed mining out of their borders while their government and state-connected entities quietly accumulated Bitcoin through other channels. China understands that whoever controls the most Bitcoin might have significant leverage in the future financial system. They're not banning it out of fear. They're positioning strategically while appearing hostile publicly. It's the same playbook they use with technology. Restrict it domestically while dominating it globally. Russia is facing international sanctions, cut off from SWIFT, desperate for ways to move money that Western powers can't freeze. Bitcoin is perfect for this. The Russian government has gone from calling Bitcoin dangerous to exploring it as a tool for sanctions evasion and international trade. When governments see Bitcoin as useful for circumventing other governments, it doesn't make Bitcoin anti-government. It makes Bitcoin a weapon in geopolitical conflict, and weapons always end up controlled by those with the most power. Let's talk about what happens when governments own significant portions of Bitcoin. Right now, Bitcoin's scarcity is its main selling point. 21 million coins maximum. Can't print more, can't inflate it away. But what happens when nation-states and massive institutions control most of the circulating supply? They can manipulate the market just like they manipulate gold prices, currency values, and every other asset. They can coordinate to dump Bitcoin when it suits their interests, or pump it when they need to. The decentralization that was supposed to prevent this kind of control only works if ownership is distributed. When a few governments and trillion-dollar institutions hold the majority, Bitcoin becomes just another asset they can weaponize. Here's the part that will make Bitcoin maximalists furious. The technology behind Bitcoin is far more useful to governments than it is to individuals seeking freedom. Blockchain provides a permanent, unchangeable record of every transaction. Governments love this. They're already exploring central bank digital currencies that use blockchain technology to track every dollar you spend, where you spend it, and what you buy. Bitcoin proved that digital money on a public ledger works. Now governments are building their own versions with complete control, and they'll use Bitcoin's existence to normalize the idea of digital-only currency before they try to phase out cash entirely. The regulatory noose is tightening, and nobody seems to care because number goes up. Every major exchange now requires full KYC, Know Your Customer, verification. They report your transactions to tax authorities. They freeze accounts when governments request it. They comply with every regulatory demand because they're corporations, and corporations always bend to government power when forced. The Bitcoin you buy on Coinbase is tracked from the moment you purchase it. The government knows you have it, knows when you sell it, knows if you try to move it. The anonymity that early Bitcoin users enjoyed is gone for anyone operating through legal channels. And here's the psychological trap. Bitcoin holders want number to go up more than they want freedom. When institutional money flows in, when governments start buying, the price increases. People who bought Bitcoin at $1,000 and watched it hit $60,000 aren't thinking about decentralization anymore. They're thinking about getting rich. They're thinking about Lambos and early retirement. So when BlackRock launches an ETF, when governments announce reserves, when regulations make Bitcoin more legitimate, the community celebrates because it pumps their bags. They've traded the revolutionary potential of Bitcoin for the hope of personal wealth. The system didn't need to destroy Bitcoin. It just needed to make Bitcoin holders rich enough to stop caring about the original mission. Nation-states are accumulating Bitcoin quietly through multiple channels. They're mining it through state-owned operations. They're seizing it through law enforcement. They're buying it through sovereign wealth funds that don't publicly disclose all their holdings. They're acquiring it through bailouts of failed crypto companies, where the government becomes a creditor. And they're doing all of this while maintaining public skepticism so they can accumulate at lower prices before they announce their positions. It's the oldest trick in the financial playbook. Talk down an asset while buying it in secret. Then announce your holdings after you've positioned yourself. The Bitcoin conference circuit is now sponsored by banks. The people who were supposed to be building an alternative to Wall Street are now pitching to Wall Street. Crypto companies are spending millions on lobbying efforts, trying to get friendly regulations, trying to work within the system rather than replace it. The entire industry has been domesticated. It went from be your own bank to please let us operate under your banking licenses. From fuck the Fed to please approve our ETFs. The spirit of rebellion has been replaced by the desire for institutional acceptance. Here's what's coming next. More governments will announce Bitcoin reserves. More regulations will formalize Bitcoin as an asset class under government oversight. More institutional adoption will centralize Bitcoin holdings in the hands of custodians who control the private keys, while you hold the receipts. Bitcoin will become accepted, legitimate, and integrated into the existing financial system. And Bitcoin holders will celebrate each step of this journey because their net worth will increase. They'll tell themselves that adoption is adoption, that winning means the price going up, that Bitcoin absorbing the system is the same as Bitcoin replacing the system. But here's the reality. An asset that governments hold, institutions custody, regulators control, and everyone buys through surveillance-heavy exchanges is not a revolution. It's just another tool for the powerful to become more powerful. Bitcoin was supposed to separate money from state. Instead, it's giving states a new form of money to control. It was supposed to bank the unbanked. Instead, it's creating new gatekeepers with more surveillance capabilities than traditional banks ever had. It was supposed to be permissionless. Instead, it requires permission from exchanges, regulators, and governments to use legally. The saddest part is that this was probably inevitable. Any technology that gains enough value will attract power, and power always finds a way to control what's valuable. Bitcoin's success as an asset guaranteed its failure as a revolution. The higher the price went, the more governments paid attention. The more institutional money flowed in, the more regulations followed. The very thing that made Bitcoin attractive, its value, is what made it a target for capture and control. So when you hear about governments quietly accumulating Bitcoin, don't mistake it for validation. It's appropriation. They're not joining your revolution, they're taking it over. And most Bitcoin holders are so focused on their portfolio value that they don't even care. The dream of decentralized money is dead. What's rising in its place is just another government-controlled asset with better marketing and a libertarian origin story that nobody believes anymore. Bitcoin isn't beating the system. The system is absorbing Bitcoin. And it's happening so quietly that by the time people realize what happened, it'll be too late to do anything about it.